So I feel like we kind of have a plan, right? Like if we had to leave here quickly.
However, I just realized. Oh, I guess Alex and Sarah could drive because I thought of the thing that you were like knocked unconscious or something.
Oh yeah, Alex and Sarah could drive my car.
Hello, beloved survivors.
I mean, the other
I'm
thing is
Autumn
like
Brown,
figuring out how to get
and
me medical
this
care
is
and
how
like
to survive the end of the
this.
world.
Like we if there's debris on the ground, we could just like try to drive like into it like around the road for a bit.
The other voice you're hearing is my eldest child, Finn. We've been recording a lot of conversations about apocalypse preparedness.
I mean,
There's this awesome book that I was just remembering that I have called Where There Is No Doctor. And it's basically all about how to provide first aid when there's no one who has like medical training as a doctor around. Mm-hmm. It's a good thing we have it.
I remember that. I remember reading this article about the Civil War where Southern doctors didn't have like much medical practice and stuff like that, but they knew like that they could use like natural resources. Like they could use cucumbers to treat burns. They used wood bark to instead of splints to hold bones in place.
When we first conceived of this series, we knew that one of the most important conversations we would have is about how we access medicine, health, and healing under the conditions of collapse. Little did we know that we would be airing the episode in the midst of a global pandemic, wherein one of the chief concerns was slowing the spread of a virus to avoid overwhelming our fragile, under-resourced, and inequitable medical systems. It wasn't hard to decide who I wanted to have this conversation with. My mind immediately leapt to the seminal text, Where There Is No Doctor, and the friend who introduced me to it, community herbalist Lauren Giambrone. Where There Is No Doctor is a village healthcare manual, originally compiled and published in the 1970s by David Werner. It's been printed in 75 languages, reprinted in multiple editions, and contains useful and easy-to-understand information about how to diagnose, treat, or prevent common diseases and injuries. You'll hear more about this text during my interview with Lauren. I was introduced to the book by Lauren back when we were both a part of the Rock Dove Collective, a radical community health exchange that was active in New York City between 2006 and 2012, which existed to link people with healthcare using a mutual aid and barter model. During that time, Lauren also became a community herbalist, a medicine maker, and a health educator. She founded the Good Fight Herb Company, and in 2010, she moved from New York City to the Hudson Valley in New York, where she opened a brick-and-mortar shop to support her practice. Since then, she has co-founded Wild Gather, the Hudson Valley School of Herbal Studies. In our conversation, Lauren shares critically important information about how we can support immune health and treat a range of illnesses using plant medicine. And she offers specific recommendations on how we can prevent and treat the coronavirus. I hope you get as much out of listening to this conversation as I did in having it.
Well, I got to herbalism through the Rock Dove Collective, essentially, but I got to the Rock Dove. Yeah, but I love you, Rock Dove. But I got to the Rock Dove Collective through burnout, and that was kind of just how I call it. I mean, that was what 2005, 2006. I was deeply, deeply burnt out and deeply physically and emotionally depleted on a level where I was just sick with like cold, flu, really bad illness that would like lay me out for a couple days. And then I'd get back up and do the same routine of just like working hard, going hard. And that was also within a time that I was doing activism in New York City, on top of all the other things as an early 20-year-old, like working a full-time job, doing full-time activism, going to dance to every DJ and every club I could, and like, just a certain kind of
Mhm.
lifestyle that I had. And there was no culture of care and there was no culture of taking care. Or it was like if you went home to sleep for the night or took a break to have dinner, it's like you weren't that wasn't centered. Let's just say that in the culture of activism that
Yeah.
I was in at the time, that was not centered. And so therefore I entered this multi-year state of what I just call burnout. And my mental health, like, was so deeply affected by it after enduring it for so long that that's when I like radically had to change my life and basically say no to so many things to say yes to so many others. And the yes was
Mm.
rest and care and cooking for myself and staying home and sleeping and not burning the candle at both ends and just like refocusing everything. And I got really into like learning about different herbs and different foods and just kind of returning to myself as a way
Mhm.
to feel better and be able to do normal day to day things with better physical and emotional capability and sustenance.
Mm.
And then through that time period, I then met the Rock Dove Collective. And y'all had just
Mhm.
literally like had one meeting or had been together 1 month, and here I was.
You're saying you met us, but really, like, you co-founded the Rocked Up Collective. Like, I feel like we had one meeting, and then you were at the second meeting, and we picked the name at the second meeting, so you definitely were a co-founder.
Right, and then I got the tattoo on my foot. Yeah,
Exactly.
just
If you have the tattoo, you're a founder.
thank you. Well, I think, and then this is where, like, social justice has just always been at the heart and center. Where, here we were as the Rock Dove Collective trying to link people. Well, firstly, our work was linking people within our New York City community who are working within social justice movements to practitioners who shared a similar perspective and framework and values and who could offer
Mhm.
essentially just safe care to communities that needed that. And so I feel like that, and then from within us interviewing practitioners, that's how I first met herbalism. And something about it really spoke to
Mm.
me, and something about it, like, I think hit some like ancestral chord too, or like feeling of remembering my grandmother and all that I wanted, and all the care. And the kitchen was the heart of my grandmother's one-bedroom apartment and in Manhattan. And I spent
Mhm.
so much of my childhood there. And so kitchen witchery, I just feel like is somewhere deep in me, and I have yet to remember it all.
Mhm.
But yeah, so I think that has always, and then I went and did my first herbal apprenticeship. And so yeah, maybe I'm rambling now, but burnout brought me to Rockdove, which brought me to herbalism. um, and social justice values have always been at the heart of it, because I first started learning about herbalism as a way to um, take care of myself in a non toxic, non chemical, outside of the system way. Because personally, for me, my experience of burnout was something that I just deeply knew that I didn't like. I wasn't going to go to the doctor for. I didn't need a pill for it. I needed
Yeah.
nourishment. Um,
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah.
What
Am I
an
just gonna, like,
what
go
an
on
im
and on or
what an important well, I know, what an important lesson also for this moment, I feel like, because, one of the things that I'm thinking about as we turn and face the unfolding crisis of this pandemic and both the very, very fast and in some ways very slow pace at which the things are starting to dissolve in terms of
Mhm.
just how our society functions. I think in that there's a reckoning that's in that for all of us about what toll it has taken on our bodies and on our relationships to maintain the pace that capitalism requires of us, and
Mhm.
to maintain the pace that fighting capitalism and fighting white supremacy and fighting institutionalized oppression of all kinds, the toll that that takes on our bodies and on our relationships. And so as we've been in this process of having to completely slow down all of the work because of the necessity of social distancing and quarantining and flattening the curve, all those things, I feel like it's making way for like an awareness and a reckoning that comes from that awareness about the impact that all of us are holding in our bodies and in our relationships and in our brains and in our hearts. And so it feels like that the lesson that you just described of like your own experience of burnout, and that just understanding that like a doctor was not going to be able to solve this problem, but nourishment and some level of like ancestral connection was going to help you solve that problem, feels really, really important, and perhaps even like prescient for right now. Um,
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you could talk to a little bit about like the, because at some point in your journey as an herbalist, you ended up like leaving New York City, moving to the Hudson Valley. Like you had started creating this company, Good Fight Herb Co. And then you ended up opening like a brick and mortar shop there. And I'm just wondering if you can share a little bit about like what moved you to leave New York, and what gave you the like, I don't know, just like the bravery, the courage
Mm.
to say, I'm gonna take this step of like actually opening up a physical space and like building out this company in order to support my practice.
Yeah. I mean, I really think that the plants were such a huge factor. I had gone and done my first herbal apprenticeship outside of New York City when I was still living there in 2008, and I left New York City in 2010. And um, that relationship that I was able to start cultivating with plants, and the acknowledging of the land and seeing the land and the plants and the stones and the creatures and the animals and the moon cycles in a totally different way and rural setting gave me this opportunity to really talk to plants and introduce myself and ask if I could
Oh,
be their
yeah.
friend, and if they could teach me what what they have to share, was just became relationships that I wanted to engage more. And when I moved back to New York City from this apprenticeship, I was working in I was working as a cook in a homeless youth drop-in center, Needle Exchange, and through Rock Dove as well, also became got linked up with friends who had lived or were living in the Hudson Valley farming, and so I got to like make those connections and start coming up and start meeting other um, punks and herbalists and farmers and folks with radical politics doing land projects and figuring things out, and in that sense. And so
Mhm.
I then had access to alignment with people who had spaces where plants grew, and because they're farming and a lot of important medicines are considered weeds, I had this incredible opportunity to initially just weed out farm beds and farm paths and take or collect and gather and like utilize a ton of medicine that I'd then bring back to the drop in and show the kids and make tea for them and start just
Wow.
making medicine for the community and reaching out to folks saying, hey, this is something I'm working on. And if you would like support in this way, I'm learning, and we can learn together through this collaboration. And so after a little while, I'd wild gather in Prospect Park like early in the morning at like 6 in the morning. And
Yeah, you did.
yeah, my apartment at the time, Marie's, another fellow rock dove and I were living together, and I would just put screens all over the floor to dry. So much. Maurice, thank you for enduring that with me. But yeah, I think the plants brought me up here, and I thought what I thought would have been a little bit of a slower or different pace, but really that that I kind of just kept up with my go hard pace. But
Mhm.
yeah, it was hard. It was hard leaving Rock Dove. It was hard leaving the city where my family is from and all my friends and community were. But it just came to a point where I didn't feel like I fit there anymore, and I didn't feel like I wanted to engage in that kind of lifestyle I was living anymore. And just the plants were like calling to me, and learning about their medicine was calling to me. And I had this opportunity to move upstate. And so I took it. And that,
Mhm.
just as deeply as Rock Dove changed my life, it was like the opportunity of moving upstate into this one farmhouse in Germantown and inherit an herb garden that had been tended to by different herbalists over the years. Like stepping into that beautiful legacy also like changed my life. And here I am like 10 years later with
Yeah.
Good Fight and Wild Gather, which is a herb school I co-facilitate with my dear friend Mandana Bushi. Yeah. So, did I answer the question?
You totally did. You totally did. I'm wondering, again, thinking back to this, like, the purpose of this conversation, thinking about, like, how we orient to our health,
Mhm.
if we're not able to access industrialized medicine.
Mhm.
I'm wondering if you can first just like I know that some of our listeners are not going to be like familiar with plant medicine, right?
Mhm.
And so I'm wondering if you can kind of give us a little bit of an introduction to begin with, like before we start getting into some of the specifics of what we can do to support our bodies during this time. If we can kind of zoom out and talk about like what are the kinds of ailments and illnesses that we can actually resolve with plant medicine and that don't necessarily require quote unquote Western medical intervention. If you
Mhm.
could like share some of the gems from your experience and how you were educated into it too as an herbalist. I think that that would be really helpful just as like an intro to this conversation.
Sure. And I also, that makes me think I just want to plug this book, Where There Is No Doctor. It's Where There Is No Doctor, a Village Healthcare Handbook. And David Werner put this out a long time ago. And I feel like as a community herbalist, working with plant medicine, I in my in my experience of studying from many different teachers, the books like this, Where There Is No Doctor, or any kind of like wilderness first aid or first aid in general, are books that when we are able to go to used bookstores, I look for them because there's so much we can learn about taking care of ourselves at home in illness and with first aid situations that we can learn from first responders and wilderness first responders and medics. So I
Mm.
just want to plug those kinds of resources that are definitely out there, and keeping
I'm
some
so
of
glad you
those.
did because I was like, we don't have to talk about the book, but also I feel like we should maybe talk about the book.
This book saved me when I was in like deep rural Maine right before I moved upstate in the Hudson Valley. And I had met Michael and Carol of the Victory Gardens Project up in Maine. And I was helping them with their wood chores one day. And I pancaked, flattened my hand in the log splitter. And this was the book that helped us to deal with the shock that my body went into, because it was going to take us it was going to take us like an ATV ride down to the car, down to the hospital. Like it was going to be like a solid hour plus before I could get medical care. And so this book,
Mhm.
like Michael and Carol had it, and we were able to completely like stabilize me, and then get me to the hospital like later on just to see if I needed x-rays, xyz. But anyway, so huge resource. Those are huge plugs
Wow.
um, for those kind of references. And I'm sure there's plenty online too. And but yeah, plant medicine. So I have studied Western herbal medicine, and it's not. I just want to say that plant medicine is indigenous medicine, and it's really important to look back into our own ancestry, chosen and bloodline wise, in terms of what our peoples did to take care of ourselves. And that's something that
Mm.
really requires a lot of creativity and maybe dreaming and maybe storytelling and asking questions, however people can go about. Maybe it's about getting cookbooks from your country of origin if you don't know how to access, there's so many different creative ways to kind of look back. But I just want to say that in terms of studying Western herbal medicine, this is um, in and of itself is problematic in terms of colonization and all of the oppression of um, Black, Indigenous, people of color, folks that white Western herbalism has taken from. So I just would like to
Mm.
say that that I just feel like that's important to say. But within the world of
Yeah,
plant medicine,
definitely.
I focus on here in my bioregion. What are the plants that are growing around here, and what are the most abundant plants growing around here? And I listen to them, and I learn from other teachers, and I learn through experience. Um, how they work, and how they can how we can work in collaboration with them to feel in our best sense of health as we determine it for ourselves, if that makes
Mm.
sense. And so
Mhm.
plant medicine, oh my gosh, y'all, I mean, plant, yeah, medicine is incredible. I mean, we can use it like a daily vitamin to deeply enrich and nourish our bodies with essential vitamins and minerals that we need to keep all of our cellular processes and body system processes going accordingly. We can use plant medicine for stress and anxiety and depression and the energetic, emotional, and physical effects of, like we were discussing before, you were saying before, Autumn, capitalism and institutionalized oppressions, and the real toll it takes on people's physical and emotional bodies. Um, and we can
Mm.
use plant medicine for trouble sleeping and allergies and Lyme disease and all kinds of first aid situations, colds and flus and fevers and um, autoimmunity and chronic illness. But really, it's one of the most powerful things about plant medicine is we can use them like pharmaceuticals, right, to like fight infection, kill
Mm.
infection. um, but we can also live in collaboration with them so that they contribute to our daily wellness and maintenance of that, and both on a physical and emotional level. And that's how I really like to talk to folks about using plant medicine when they come into the shop or at any of the million markets I used to do, because that's
Mhm.
not something here in the Western world. Well, I should say, like, a lot of folks grow up in really rich traditions of using food and herbs as part of their daily life and daily practice. And a lot of us have had that taken from us, or we've never experienced that before. So that's something that I
Right.
really like to talk to folks about, in that they're just kind of like
Can
daily.
can you give an
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, can you give an example of, like, when you say, like, I hear you sort of talking about it in a that you're sort of like enlisting the plants as allies in daily
Mhm.
life. And I'm wondering if you can just give some examples of what that looks like.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So, well, let's just immediately, I'm like, okay, let's talk about dandelion because dandelion grows.
Hey.
We all, I can maybe safely assume that many of us know dandelion, right? We've seen it grow in cracks in the sidewalk, alongside the basketball court outside in Brooklyn, or we've seen it in meadows, grasses, lawns. It's just, it literally can grow and thrive anywhere in any space, which is such a call for resiliency and community as well. But, so dandelion is something that, you can eat the leaves for nutrition and for spring awakening and getting our digestive juices moving. We can eat the roots. We can make a tea out of the roots for those same effects. We can, you know, use the flower in lots of different ways for topical medicines or just to incite joy and sunshine and
Hmm.
ease. So, like, this is something that's just literally growing around where you are, and you can be in relationship with it, and then um, work with it kind of regularly in your life to build that relationship while it's also like just maintaining really good digestive liver wellness. It's kind of like
Mm.
or something too where I think of nettles or oats, like these are, instead of taking a daily vitamin, which I sometimes do and I get at the store, but I can also drink a cup of nettle or oat tea a couple times a day, and also get my vitamins and minerals that way, get my adrenals and nervous system supported. And yeah, does that make sense? Just kind of like living in relationship.
Yeah.
Like I would take my nettle and oat tea just like I would, you know, making breakfast, making lunch. Like I know I need to do those things, and this is something that I'm adding into it. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
and then there's many times I don't take my herbs.
Yeah.
But, it's just all the practice of taking care of ourselves and or myself, sorry, and figuring out what makes me feel best, what, might not make me feel best, and then what am I choosing to prioritize in the moment. And can I just say, like, maybe I'm going a little off here, but I feel like coronavirus has really given me a bit of a swift kick around certain things that I consume regularly in my life that don't actually make me feel good and in my most strength or in my most power, but I do them anyway because they fulfill
Mm.
other needs that are fun or
Mhm.
coping mechanisms that I rely on. And so,
Right. Right.
you know what I mean? So, like, right now, I'm like, oh, I'm kind of actually not chilling with sugar, and I'm not drinking the cold, cheap beer that I love often or as often, because the next day I get kind of the sniffles and I have less energy. I feel lethargic, and I get really worn out feeling if I like indulge in those things too hard, which I like to do. And then I'm like worried
Mhm.
that I have coronavirus, and I
And I'm
just,
worried I have the virus.
I'm like, "Oh god," I, like, feel I what had to go to the grocery store, at the post office. Anyway, I'm just saying that, like, it's really given me an opportunity to, like, kind of reconcile with, um, practicing, like, taking my herbs and eating foods and resting in ways that make me feel most strong, because without coronavirus, I can easily just, like, plow through, and not prioritize that as much, because I am not worried that the sniffle that I get after a night of drinking beer is a virus that could potentially be incredibly harmful to me and my larger community. So,
Right, right. That's
just
so interesting. And actually it connects to there's something else that you said that I kind of wanted to ask you a question about, that I heard you say at some point that that there's a component of working with plants and working with plant medicine that is about understanding and defining health and wellness for yourself. And and I and I think I'm like taking that to mean that there's a component of the practice that really, it requires you to be in conversation with your body, because you have to be, in order to know whether or not the particular medicine that you're using is actually like functioning well for your body. and
Mhm.
and which is a really different approach, right, than like within a Western medical context. It's like, um or I should say within an industrial medical context,
Mhm.
the it's more of a one size fits all cure, right? That it's like, if you're sick with this, then this is what you take, and you take it in this dose, and it makes you feel better in this amount of time, and that's what that is. And if there are side effects for that cure, then those have to be dealt with in some other way, if they're dealt with at all, or it's just sort of understood that there's going to be,
Right.
like if you take a we all know, like if we take an antibiotic, then it's going to basically destroy the healthy bacteria that live in our guts. And so we're either going to deal with that in some proactive way, or we're just going to deal with like the how painful and problematic that is for our digestion for weeks on end, right? And
Mhm.
so what I'm hearing you describe is like a really different way of relating to medicine itself, that's much more like conscious, and like where the person taking the medicine is really at choice, and also defining wellness for themselves. Like, what is your wellness goal, and how does this medicine going to help you get there? Am I like understanding that correctly?
Yes, absolutely. Self-determined 100%. And I really appreciate what you're saying. And there is no one healthy state and there's no one expert practitioner. It's people who live in bodies that experience their bodies and know exactly how their bodies operate and sometimes need support and from outside resources to make their bodies and their minds and their hearts and spirits and all of the interconnectedness feel um their self-determined, self-defined state of health. And I feel like
Mm,
I really just want to give the deepest bow of gratitude for the disability justice movement and folks with chronic illness who live with this in ways where their bodies and their invisibilizations through the medical industrial complex are so real and have been for so long that coronavirus is like new for a lot of people, and there's experiences out there that have been here for a long time, and there's a lot of brilliance that comes and wisdom that comes from that work and that community. um, and and again, because we get to define, because we are the experts on our own bodies and our own selves, and we might not always personally know what we need, but we should be able to access practitioners, healers, farmers, neighbors, in ways that we can seek the support and resources that we need to feel most well. And so I think plant
mm,
medicine for me personally was such a huge light bulb or awakening or comfort and inspiration, um, because of how because of how beautiful they are. And getting to, when I was learning about plant medicine, I got
mm,
to like witness the plants like growing in real life. And so like witnessing their
yeah.
beauty and magic, like which is something that, I really like to bring to people in whatever form I can, either at the shop or in herb school. It's like being a facilitator to connect people to plants. It's like there was something so inspiring about wanting to take that medicine in, and the safety of that, and the knowing that peoples of time and time and time past have been doing this. Like there's something right about this. And I have a lot of gratitude for modern medicine, in the sense that, I take doxycycline when I have an acute Lyme infection, and it's helped me. And I am so grateful that that medicine exists. But there's no binary. There's no like either or. There's no like, you're a crazy plant lady, or you're, like, medical expert or antibiotics for everything. It's like there's so much room and there's so much space in between. And I think those were the spaces that I was most curious of. And then lastly, it's like then the experience of me taking in plant medicine, building back up from burnout, and like significantly like taking care of some shit in my life, like health wise and emotionally wise. Like I had the personal experience then of taking in plant medicine and seeing changes and transformations. And so that's enough, that's everything.
Totally. Well, and we don't have to include this in the show if you don't feel comfortable with us including this. We can like our producer can just cut it. But I remember you healing your own HPV infection with
Yeah.
plant medicine.
Yeah.
And I remember being like, I remember that being a real turning point for me in terms of understanding the power of plant medicine, where I was like, oh my God, like you can literally heal this thing that like now, there's all this like national controversy over like at what age should people get vaccinated against this disease. And then like I'm over here, but like thinking like, oh, but one of my dearest, oldest friends literally healed her own HPV infection with plant medicine. Like that's also
Yeah.
possible. And
That
again, it doesn't have to be a binary, but like, yeah.
Yeah, that's my big success story, Boo. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I'm actually like, well, I'll have to see where it's at now with the printing process because of what we're, state of the world. But I wrote a zine based on my experience over the last 12 years with HPV, coming from like my first case. Anyway, long story, but I'm really excited for that to come out. And I'm still, still working through it. I mean, that's one of the things that comes and goes and is, so again, we'll put that on our list of like what plant medicine can touch upon. Well, it can clear viruses and change the nature of our cellular structure when it's like, being affected by viruses in HPVs, in the sense of that. So yeah, it's so incredible. I'm so happy to have that story to share with people.
Yeah, it's an incredible story. Well, and so on that note, I'm like, okay, there is this pandemic happening. It is a virus. So like let's have our moment where we get down to brass tacks. I know that listeners are wondering like, what can they do to support their own immune health, specifically respiratory and lung health?
Yeah.
And so I would love to hear your advice for our listeners. Also, because anyone who's listening to our show is also going to be thinking about and sharing this information just in their own communities and families. So thinking about like, what can people be doing to support their own immune, respiratory, and lung health? But also thinking about like what is available to people in their own homes or nearby. What are home remedies? What are community remedies? I'm wondering about both what people can do and also what can people do safely and what is accessible to people, especially people who, are low income or no income, which is increasingly more of us because of the economic slowdown.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this is great. This is so, good to talk about and share with one another. And thank you for that opportunity. And I just want to just plug because they're two really great resources. So before I get into some of my favorites here, I just want to also say that Gina Badger of Long Spell Herbs put together what's called a Kitchen Witch's Guide to Wellness in the Time of COVID-19. And Gina did that alongside contributions from many herbalist friends and comrades and teachers of mine. And it's really accessible, really well done, really informative. So if you, it's called Get Radical Boil Roots, and you can find that through Long Spell
Awesome.
Herbs on Instagram or
And
on.
we can link to that in the show notes too.
Oh, great. Okay, great.
Yeah,
Also,
totally.
my dear friend, Vadi Erdal, also an herbalist, on Instagram, her handle is Nodding Thistle and Rose Milk. She's put up a ton of incredible herbal and food resources, like in the highlights. Like you can make stories and then save them. They're called highlights. Y'all probably
Mhm.
know, but I'm catching on. And
For our analog people out there, that's what a highlight is.
but I just want to plug that too because Vadi's incredible and an incredible plant facilitator, plant connector, and an herbalist. So these two resources I think are really good ones. So yeah, we can share them in the notes. But some of my things when we're thinking about immunity and we're thinking about lung health and we're thinking about COVID-19. So, and these are not just, this is things that I'm saying that I'm doing for myself and that I think are great to do right now and also are just a collection of collective wisdom. They're not just all my own here. So I just want to plug all the other
Mhm.
folks out there offering the same information. But some things that we know, and we've even talked about this before, is definitely prioritizing eating foods that feel good when you eat them. And right now too with this virus it's focusing and prioritizing on warming foods. So while we definitely could like have some ice cream or some whatever dairy products, things like that that feel really good and comforting when we're socially isolating and in this pandemic state, I also want to just say like just to then mitigate or navigate how much of those things we're eating in comparison to other herbs that are warming. So things like garlic,
Mm.
cardamom, ginger, soups, broths, stews, because this virus is cold and it's wet and damp. So when it,
Mm.
if when we come into contact with it, it can become really, really troublesome and problematic if it gets deep into our lungs. And that cold and damp, we want to counteract with spice and warm. So regardless of what your
Mm.
budget is, what food store, outlet, wherever you access your food from, if you make sure to get garlic and get any spicy peppers or hot sauce or things like that, ginger, all of these kitchen remedies are going to be everyone's like number one ally and friend at this time. Um,
Mm.
so those are good to incorporate. Also, aromatic herbs like sage, rosemary, thyme, oregano. Those are really, really great to have on hand right now. You can buy them at grocery stores, fresh sometimes dried. It doesn't matter what form, and you can bring them home and put them on. You can cook with them. You can make tea with them and drink that throughout the day, but you can also put them in a pot of water on your stove and put it onto like a simmer so that it creates a steam, and that steam is going to
Mm.
cleanse the air. They're antiviral, antimicrobial herbs. The pungency in them kicks butt, serious butt kickers. So getting that medicine up into
Mm.
the air of where you're quarantining is a great idea, as well as sticking your head
And could you
over the
just say those
pot.
herbs again? Like
Oh,
the
sure.
could you just list the herbs again?
Yeah, so these steaming herbs are sage, thyme, rosemary, oregano. For folks who have access to the outdoors, you can also harvest pine needles, cedar needles. Um, And remember to ask the trees lovingly or look for windfall and see if there's any branches down where you can, that would be even better. So
Hmm.
that medicinal steam is going to purify the air of any microbes that we don't want to cohabitate with during quarantine. And also for folks that are going outside to the grocery store or essential workers or to the post office or wherever you might have to go once a week, once every other week, or the one person in your quarantine pod or household has to go. These steams are really good to do after you come in from the outdoors and wash your hands and wash your
Mm.
face. And they're essentially, the virus likes to stick to our eyeballs, in our nostrils, and in our throat onto those mucous membranes. So if we can cleanse those things with these herbs, it's super helpful. You can also burn those herbs in your space. Very grounding, and also, again, cleansing and purifying the air. Um, I would also recommend salt water gargles once a day, or when you have to come in from the outdoors. Again, the salt is going to pull from, draw any microbes out from the tissue. So that's really good to consider doing.
Ah.
Yeah, when I come in from shipping herbs or having to go, to the grocery store, I definitely like come home, take my outdoor clothes off, wash my face, wash my hands, gargle, um, and sometimes take a shower, for sure. Um,
Yeah.
and okay, so we got the steams, we got the warming foods and herbs, we've got the saltwater gargle. I am really hot on medicinal mushrooms like reishi, shiitake, maitake, turkey tail. I've been using those a lot in broths or I make tincture from them. So sometimes you can find those things at certain food stores or markets as well,
Hmm.
just for folks who want to know a little bit of other kind of herbs I might be using. But those kitchen witch herbs are definitely like such a good go-to. The garlic, my favorite little garlic trick is just chopping up a whole head or at least a bunch of cloves and chopping it up small, putting it in a little dish with olive oil and salt, and then just eating it on anything I'm eating, toast or soup or eggs in the morning. And
Yeah.
that is going to be a really great daily immune supporter. Excuse me, and one that's accessible. Um, Fermented foods
And
and
it's like,
keeping.
why
Oh, yeah.
not have medicine be delicious? That's my whole feeling.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Hmm.
And I really love thyme in tea. Like if you just steep a little thyme in some hot water, I mean, it's delicious. Add a little honey. I mean, it's
Totally.
perfect for right now. It's such a good respiratory support and such a great antimicrobial, meaning it's fighting off pathogens. Um, and then, I had not made sauerkraut in like 12 years. I feel like
Hmm.
fermented foods are really important, and you can make it at home now that we have maybe more time, some of us, folks out there, and cabbage is inexpensive and salt is readily available, and there's plenty of easy recipes. You can just wing it yourself, but just to look online to kind of see what it looks like to make sure you're doing it correctly or whatever. But that one, I'm just like, yeah, get into the, like, what Dory Midnight calls pandemic crafts. Make some sauerkraut, get that fermented food in your
Hmm.
gut. Such a huge immune support. And also, lastly, to getting the body moving for our lymph system to keep flowing. Our lymph system is like a highway system, like our blood, our capillary system, our vein system. We have these lymph systems, if you're or lymph nodes, I'm sorry, if you feel in your throat or your armpit, around the chest, in the groin. There's these spots where if you've been sick before, you might have felt like different lymph nodes swollen. And the lymph
Mm-hmm.
system is essentially clearing the metabolic waste that your immunity is creating by going around and gobbling up all of the foreign invaders that the body wants to get rid of. But the lymph
Mm-hmm.
system can get stuck, and that prolongs illness. So we want to encourage it to move and flow, which body movement and those warming foods are really helpful with, as well as staying super well hydrated and drinking tons of water. But moving the body
Mm-hmm.
a little vigorously, like whatever that means for you, is helpful with that. And or doing warm salt baths at home, whether that's a foot bath and you stick your feet in your biggest pot that you have in the kitchen, or you have a bathtub and you can get your body in there, but getting the heat moving throughout the body and getting the lymph system moving and flowing, so that they were clearing pathogens and toxins from the environment as best we can, I think is another really great one to consider incorporating into our like weekly quarantine life.
That's so helpful, and I feel like that one is the one that's probably really hard for a lot of us to do right now, because I think, like, I mean, in addition to, like, depending on where you are and depending on, what different individuals' quarantines look like, I think that um, there's, like, varying levels of, like, accessibility of, like, going outside safely for people, and so then there's this question of, like, how do we get I really appreciate you giving these different options for, like, how to get that the lymph systems moving with heat, so that even if, like, getting outside and moving vigorously outside is not an option for you, there's other ways to do it. And of course, obviously,
Mhm.
that's super supportive of, like, mental and emotional wellness too, like, moving
Yeah.
the body vigorously, being outside, all those things are helpful, and I think, I'm hearing from a lot of people that I'm close to that there is some real, depression and grief setting in at this
Yeah.
time about what's happening, which is resulting in people wanting to move less or having a hard time actually getting up and moving around.
Oh my gosh, I feel that. I feel you all. I feel that. I am experiencing that too, and that's super real. And the grief component came up um, more specifically for me and other friends and folks that I've been in touch with over this week. I feel like now that we're a couple weeks in, or a bit of time in, I feel like that collective grief and tragedy is setting in a different way. Like I feel like a couple weeks ago there was more kind of like, okay, setting things up, setting myself up, making sure I had what I needed, checking in on friends, checking in on family. I live alone, so I, you know, a lot of time was spent like checking in on other folks, but I feel like the grief. So whereas I had spent some time kind of like readying and steadying and kind of focusing
Mhm.
and not being able to really sleep and being hyper on and trying to digest all this information and learning about the virus and learning about what herbs could be helpful and navigating all the changes in my personal life and daily life and those of all the people that I care about. It was like, now that we've had some time in and even more and more loss is happening and more dismantling of the system is happening, it's like a lot of grief is setting in and a lot of collective grief is setting in, and it's exhausting. It's exhausting, and it
Yes.
makes my body
Yeah.
hurt with physical pain, and it makes me not want to go get up and take a walk outside. And yet I feel like those are the awakening moments where we can do all we can to let have those feelings flow and move and continue to have agency and make choices about what we need to support ourselves best in that moment. And so even if we
Yeah,
choose to not choose, that's like a choice, but I just want to remind myself that
totally.
like
Mhm.
we still can make choices around it. We still have
Mhm.
agency, we still have self-determination, even though our access looks a lot different right now. And that's what's so important about turning to community, turning to plants, turning to each other in terms of navigating how to figure that out now. Hmm.
Yeah. And on that tip, I just, before we shift away from the like, uh, what can people do with plants question, um, I really appreciate you giving this list of like the things that actually are really accessible and usable regardless of one's, like level of familiarity with herbalism and plant medicine. And I'm wondering if there's any specific herbal medicines that you would recommend people having on hand if they can get them, um, that would be useful to have should people contract the virus?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is I feel like, because I also work with bioregional plants, like I'm thinking about what's here, but I've also been learning from and in conversation with herbalists who are bioregionally translating medicinal formulas that are coming from traditional Chinese medicine and coming from China that have been used for COVID. Um,
Mm,
but I would say, I don't, without knowing all of those herbs or having access to all those herbs, I would definitely say, um, well, one thing to have on hand at home that's super useful is a thermometer and Tylenol. Um, so
mhm,
that those are fever reducers, but plants that are also fever reducers are yarrow and elderflower. Those are called diaphoretics. They help reduce fever. Cooling
mm,
herbs like peppermint or skullcap. Um, those herbs can be cooling to a fever, so they can be used in conjunction with the diaphoretics. But then, because of the cold nature of this virus, we want to again have those warming herbs at home, like the uh, aromatics, the like we talked before, the rosemary, the sage, the oregano, the thyme especially, but also other warmers like uh basils, holy basil. That one
mm,
would be great. Anise hyssop is another really great respiratory herb. Mullein is a really great respiratory herb. Opening up the airways, it's an old asthmatic remedy. You could pull in the medicine through drinking it as a tea, or even like pulling in the smoke of the plant or someone blowing the smoke of the plant into your lungs. Um,
mm,
and we also have elecampane, which is an incredible plant that helps pull cold, damp infection out from within our lungs up and out. Um,
wow.
so I might be kind of like spitfiring here, but I'm just like off the top of my head. And then
No,
also
I mean,
too,
this is all so useful.
yeah, and then those medicinal mushrooms again, like the reishi, the turkey tail, those contribute to our vital force, and build and support and keep in balance our deep innate immunity. Um, and so, and other adaptogens do that as well, like eleuthero and astragalus, schizandra. Um, so those can help contribute to the fatigue and the vital force that gets like seriously taken down by this virus, while incorporating those respiratory herbs like the mullein, elecampane, anise hyssop, the warmers like the holy basil, and those food medicines. And then for the
Mm,
fever, the yarrow, the diaphoretics, and then the cooling agents like the peppermint. So yeah, that's what I
wow,
got. That's what I'm thinking. Oh, and
that's
sorry, one more thing.
amazing.
the clearers, the cleansers, the lymph movers. So we can use cleavers, calendula, red clover, things that are lymphagogues. They get the lymph system moving. We can also use liver supporting herbs like dandelion, burdock, yellow dock. So we want to add those things in as well to kind of make sure the body is eliminating the work that the immunity is doing to clear the virus. You know what I mean? So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
This is really
And
helpful. And so, and in that, in the document that that you were referencing earlier, that
yes,
we'll link to in the show notes, there's protocols in that document for like how to use these herbal remedies, right? So people are not having to kind of like, you know, play a guessing game about how to use them and in what order and what to use together, but are actually going to get guidance about how to do this.
yeah. Yes, exactly. There's
Awesome.
definite guidance in there for sure. Yeah, and
Beautiful.
that's
This
a
is
great
very
question. And the other thing maybe too, I'd just like to say with, at-home remedies or herbal remedies, yes, there are definitely plenty of plants out there that are medicinal but are considered toxic and have to take in very specific ways. And there are also plants out there that interact negatively with certain medications. But in general, when we're talking about the herbs we listed here and the ones that are in that document, the ones that are probably, at home in many of our kitchens, they are really safe, and it is okay to play around with them and experiment and listen to your gut and listen to your intuition on a lot of them. And so I just want to remind folks to allow that experimentation, allow that okayness and playfulness to come in, because a lot of these plants are incredibly safe to work with. And it's just a really great point that you bring up around the safety issue.
Yeah, and I can say too, I've been taking your medicine for years, and I just have so much respect for you as a practitioner and as a visionary. And so thank you for everything, and especially for this time that you just gave so generously.
Oh gosh, thank you, Autumn.
Thanks for tuning in to the Apocalypse Survival mini-series of How to Survive the End of the World. In a future episode, we will continue the conversation about medicine and healing under conditions of collapse, but looking at the issue through the lens of integrative healthcare models and systems change. Other upcoming episodes will look at food and water on the run, digital security, and protecting ourselves. Tune in for our next episode, where I talk with Leah Penniman of Soulfire Farm about growing food, rehabilitating the land, and the role of food sovereignty movements in reconnecting our bodies with land and our ancestors. How to Survive the End of the World is on Twitter and Instagram at End of the World PC. We're also on Facebook at End of the World Show. You can make a sustaining donation to our show by visiting our page at patreon.com/endoftheworldshow. There's no better time than now to support our podcast. The more our listeners give, the more of this critical content we can produce and get out to folks. Another incredibly helpful thing you can do to help our show sustain itself is to write us a review on Apple Podcasts if you are an iPhone person. How to Survive the End of the World is produced and edited by the incomparable Zach Rosen. Music for today's show comes from Tunde Olaniran and Mother Cyborg.
How will you know when you've reached the life you're looking for? See, how will you know? When you've gone too far, how will you know the life you're looking for? What will you do with the information you find?